Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video you'll see a battle report for Brutality, the Skirmish Wargame. I recently published the book review video for Brutality, the Skirmish Wargame, but now it's time to dive in and go through a full-on battle report for the game. So I've been testing it out, playing a few games, and now you'll see two warbands I put together going against each other in the brutal realm. At the end of the video, I'll also go over a little review so that you can get a good idea of what I think about the game, and then hopefully that'll help you decide whether or not this is something you'd like to add to your collection. Right, let's get started, and here's our first warband, the Assassins. They'll be facing off against some fierce warriors from the Cannibal tribes. They'll be doing battle in these town ruins which were ripped from their native dimensions by the goddess Ishtar. Let's start with the Cannibal tribe warriors first, and we'll begin with the leader, Grossnog. Grossnog is a fierce warrior, so he's from the melee class, but I've given him an upgrade to Zealot and also the model ability Sturdy, and he's also got some upgrades under fighting skill, dexterity and save as well, +1 to each. I also gave him a power. He gets the time slip, so he's going to get a time slip token each turn, but in turns 3 and 4 that's going to go up to 2 tokens. Next up, we've got Sen, and he's a ranged warrior, and he's upgraded to a pistolier, but his weapon of choice is the bow and arrows. He's got the model ability Point Blank, and with that ranged weapon, that's a 10-inch range weapon, but he's going to get 2 shots with it, and he can also re-roll missed hits, so that's a really good ability to have there. And then with the movement, I've given him an extra 2 inches of movement and a +1 to his dexterity. We've got to have some magic in the warband, and this is where Zarnak comes in. And Zarnak is a support class, been upgraded to adaptive, which is going to give them 2 powers, but they can choose the powers each activation, so they don't have to choose 2 for the whole game. So that's really interesting. They've also got a model ability Burning, which is going to play into the narrative of the model. And then for the upgrades, I've given +1 to dexterity and +1 to will, and that +1 to will is going to help those powers to go off. The Cannibal tribes are not short of warriors, and that's where Daedric comes in. He's another melee class. He's got no upgrades. We decided to go with 3 upgrades per warband, but he does have a model ability of Sturdy. That's going to help him on the wound table later on, and he's also got +1 to fighting skill and dexterity. And the final member of the warband, this sinister character, Cypher. And again, no upgrades here, but he's a fast class. He's got a model ability Stealthy, which is going to give him +1 save when he's in cover. He's also got +1 to fighting skill and +1 to dexterity. For the faction trait, I chose Rage, and this is going to give them a constant bonus where they're going to get +2 to wound chart rolls in melee, and then also they've got 2 feats, and the feats they can only use once. And so the first feat is this model changes its charge roll to a 9 after it rolls the charge. So if it gets a poor charge roll, you can just simply change it to a 9. And then the next feat is treat this model's fighting skill as 7 for this melee before modifiers, again after successfully charging into melee. Now let's take a look at the Assassins, and again 5 miniatures, 3 will be upgraded. And the first one is our leader, Ragnar Ironfist. Ragnar's armed with this special weapon, and he's going to be in the ranged class. He's been upgraded to a hunter, and he's also got the model ability Point Blank. He can shoot a 20-inch ranged weapon twice, ignoring cover, and there's also some rules if you shoot some of the different enemy that are out of line of sight. So that's really interesting. He's almost got some kind of tech that allows those bullets to find the enemy, like heat seeking, something like that. Ragnar's got some bonuses to fighting skill +1, dexterity +1, and also to save +1. That's going to help him stay in the fight a little bit longer, but with that nice movement 8, he's certainly going to get around the board really quickly. Ragnar was sucked into the brutal realm with his trusty wolfhound Ingrid, and this has been upgraded to a beast, and also the model ability Lightning Fast, and this comes into the fast class. And with Ingrid, I've given an extra +2 inches to movement there, making that 12 inches. So she's going to get around the board really quickly. And also for fighting skill, +1. And with the beast upgrade, you can re-roll run and charge rolls, so she's certainly going to get into the fight with that ability. To take those cannibals out at a distance, Viggy has joined the warband, and this is a ranged weapon with an upgrade to heavy ranged and also a model ability point blank. And with this weapon it's 20-inch range and you get 2 shots, but with this one aiming is free, and aiming is going to give you +2 to your hits, so your hit roll. So that's a really good ability to have to make sure some of those shots go through. I've also given a +2 to move just to get to some good positions, and I've also given him +1 to dexterity just to help him dodge out of the way of any incoming fire when he's in a crow's nest position. Next up, we've got our melee fighter. This is Edgar, and he hasn't been upgraded but does have the model ability Sturdy. That's going to help him with that wound table roll, so if he gets a 1 to 4 on that roll, it's not going to affect him. He's also got +1 to fighting skill and +1 to save, just to help him stay in the battle that little bit longer. And our final member of the warband is Inga the Witch, and no one knows how long she's been in the brutal realm, but judging by the look of her, she's certainly lost a few body parts along the way and gone slightly insane while she's at it. But she's going to be a support model, so expect some healing magic here. She's got the Flight Agile upgrade, that's going to help her get across the terrain nice and quickly. She's also got the Stealthy model ability and a +1 to Will, and that Will stat is going to help for the powers to go off, and the powers she's got are Protect and Time Slip, so she is going to be playing like a healing role within the warband. The assassins are all about working together and being pretty stealthy, so they've got the faction trait called Stealth, and their constant here gives the models reroll failed saved rolls of 8 to 10 if a cover modifier is being applied to the rolls. The first feat that can only be used that once is that this model cannot be targeted by range attacks or charges this game turn if the attacker is more than 6 inches away. So you do this at the beginning of the game turn. And then the second feat is you can add 6 inches to this model's move stat, but this doesn't apply to maximum run range. And you do this again at the beginning of the model's activation. With our warbands ready for battle, let's take a look at the battlefield next and get it set up ready to play. And then for the rest of the game, the white dice will be used by the assassins and the black dice will be used by the cannibals. Here's our battlefield, which is marked out by red tape to give us a 3 by 3 foot square, and then we've got lots of different terrain on here, lots of ruins from some long forgotten world. We've got cargo crates to hide behind and get some cover if we're dashing across those open corridors that you can see in between all the different buildings. We've got an old train that's been sucked into the brutal realm and toppled over, part of a track as well, and just an all-round sorry state of buildings to explore, get some vantage points in and take out the enemy. Maybe even use this water tower to get up there and get some height, or perhaps hide behind these little brick walls that are left, or even shoot from inside the buildings. The two warbands will be fighting over precious resources, which are either gifts dropped from Ishtar or perhaps a stash left from other warbands. Maybe they've forgotten about them, maybe they're coming back to pick them up again later on. Either way, there'll be 5 of these dotted around the battlefield. You may have noticed that the main buildings have been numbered, and that's because in Brutality there are region effects, and these take place throughout the game while you're searching the different objectives. And when you do a search in the barrel, you have to roll a dice. You have to roll 1d10. Now if you roll a 1, the active model is stuck in rubble and they gain what's called a pause token, which you'll see later on. But if you roll a 10, a random building collapses, and then that building is going to roll over onto its side, potentially crushing those stood outside of it and also injuring those who were unfortunate enough to be within it. So that's a really exciting feature of the game, which I can't wait for you to see later on. Right, it's time for battle, so let's roll off and see which warband is going to choose the side to place their warriors. With an 8, the assassins win that one, and they're going to choose the right-hand side edge of the board. The cannibals don't get a choice, as the rules state they have to take the adjacent side of the board. As the assassins won the board edge roll-off, they get to choose which player begins deploying first, and so they chose to do that, and you can see now that the models are going to alternate, so the assassins go first, then the cannibals, one model at a time until all are placed on the board. With our models all in place and ready to go, it's time to go back to the objective markers, which are those barrels we saw earlier. So here you can see we've got 5 barrels all lined up down the centre of the board, and they're all going to be parallel with the board edges that our warbands have started on. Nothing straightforward in the brutal realm, so now we have to roll to see how many inches they're going to randomly roll and in which direction. And we use the pointer on the 10-sided dice to tell us which direction, and the number on it to tell us how many inches to move it. And so you can see here this is 4, and we follow the direction of the dice, and then we do that for each of the barrels until all have been moved. And you can see why it's important to place the models first, because this really makes it totally random, and it almost forces you to spread your models out along your deployment zone, which is 10 inches from your board edge into the battlefield, and then you're not going to know where these are going to go. So this is a really fun part of the game and sets up the kind of direction that the whole battle is going to go in. And there we go, that's all the barrels now randomised, and now this is putting a lot of tension into the centre of the board. So rather than being spread out before, now there's going to be a huge focus on those 3 central objectives. The player with the most victory points will win this battle, and victory points are earned by either killing another opponent or by successfully searching one of the objectives. You'll earn 1 victory point for each of those, and I'm going to use these little counters to represent them and just use the black and white dice so you know which warband is getting them throughout the game. You'll also get 1 command token per warband per turn to use, but only if your leader is still alive and on the board. With setup complete, it's time for battle to commence with turn 1. If you know any dodgy goings on or any mistakes, then please add it in the comment section below so we can all learn the game together. The assassins get things started with Viggy, who measures up to see if he's in range of his enemy Daedric, and he's just within that 20-inch range, and so he can take 2 shots. So he rolls the dice. We're looking to beat the dexterity of 6 here for Daedric. Now that's a 5, but he gets a +2 modifier because he's got the free aim ability. That's going to give him +2 to the roll. Daedric needed a 2 to save that, and he was lucky early on he got that 2, so no damage inflicted there. The boss Grosnog was impressed with his luck and wants to find out how far he can push it, so he gets him to move forward towards those objectives in the centre using his first action, which is the movement action. To get closer, he decides to run and rolls a huge 9. That's going to get him 9 more inches there. So he moves out into the centre and positions himself right next to one of those objective barrels. Remember those command tokens? They give you 1 extra free action, and that's going to go straight to Daedric, and he's going to search the barrel. He rolls a 6, and that's an immediate victory point. So they're straight in with 1 in only the 2nd model to be activated so far. Ragnar from the Assassins wasn't happy with that. I'll take the roof off so you can see him move to a better position on that elevated platform, and then he's going to be looking down on those objectives, hoping to steal them away. And then he measures up to see if he's within half range. Now he's got that 20-inch range. So as long as he's 10 inches, he's going to get an extra +1 to hit. Ragnar rolls, and that's +1. That gives him 1 hit. So that 6 becomes a 7, and that's going to be a successful hit. So now it's up to Daedric to roll and see if he can save that. He has to get a 2 or less, and rolling a 4's no good, and that's going to be 1 point of damage for Daedric. He also gets a roll on the wound chart now, and that's a 4. So Daedric is skewered. That would be -2 to dexterity, but lucky for Daedric, he's got that sturdy ability, so 1 to 4 on the wound chart doesn't do anything to him. Back to the Cannibals now, and who's this sneaky chap? This is Cypher, and it looks like he's coming around that building and heading towards one of the objectives. Even with that movement 8, it's not going to get him there, so he chooses to use his next action to run, and he rolls a 4, and he's almost within touching distance of it, but not quite. Back to the Assassins, and Edgar's keen to get into the action as he moves towards the centre of the battlefield. He wants to get in there nice and early, so chooses to use his second action to run, gets a good 7, that's going to get him in really close. This could be a bit of a bold move, it's going to put him in close proximity to a good number of the enemy fighters, but he does have that command token to use up, and he's within range of the objective there, so he's going to search. Let's see what he gets. And he rolls the dice, And he gets a 6. That's a successful search and 1 victory point. So that brings it to 1 victory point apiece. Back to the Cannibals, and Grossnog wants to get in on the action too, so he moves up to one of the objective barrels, and he rolls a dice. Now he's rolled a 10. This is potentially really bad news. Now we have to roll a d6 to see which building's going to topple over, and it's building number 5. The ground shakes as the Brutal Realms release its fury onto the warriors, and which way is this going to go? It's going to go straight towards Zarnak of the Cannibals there, and so I'm just measuring it to see if it actually reaches him, and he's just going to escape the reach of that building. That's pretty lucky there, but no one inside, so no one's going to get crushed from within, and as that falls onto its side, no one's going to be injured either. That was a really close call for Zarnak, but now he's finding himself trapped. So if he wanted to go round that building, he's going to have a job to do it. But we're back to the assassins now, as Inga the Witch puts herself into a nice defensive position, but then rolls a 10 to get a bit more distance, but decides to hang back. She's not going to use it all, just going to perch herself up against the side of the building there. Sen's turn for the Cannibals. The Pistolier is sneaking into a nice position there. He's going to get a little bit of cover from these carriages, but he's also exposed Edgar, who's now got no cover from his ranged weapons. And as you can see, he's getting a good look at Edgar through the track, and he can see him clearly. So he's going to be able to take 2 shots at him with no cover bonus. Let's see what he gets. He gets a 5 and a 9. That's 1 hit with the 9. Don't forget he can reroll misses, and with a 7, that beats Edgar's dexterity of 6. Edgar needs a 3 or less here to save, and he gets a 1. Now this is a critical save, and I made a mistake here. I only gave him 1 save. I should have given him 2 saves for a critical save, so he shouldn't have taken any damage here, but that's the nature of the Brutal Realms, and he does take 1 point of damage. This shouldn't have happened to him either, but he does roll a 2. It would be disarmed, but don't forget he's got sturdy for his model ability, so 1 to 4 on the wound chart, nothing happens, so less lucky for Edgar at least. Now we go back to the assassins, and it's the turn of Ingrid the Beast to make it into the centre and support Edgar, and she's going as close as she can. She's got to keep 2 inches between her and an opponent, and so just making sure that measures up nicely before rolling for a charge, and with a 10 she's going to get right in there and charge into Daedric. Let's see some close combat in action. Now only 1 attack from Ingrid, but she gets an 8. That's really good, so that's going to hit. But let's see what Daedric does, and he gets 2 attacks, and he's a 7 and a 9. Those might look like good results, but with melee attacks, you've got to get equal to or less than your fighting skill. So this is where you want some low numbers on the dice. So no damage for either party there, but you do have to move them 2 inches apart again, so the defender is pushed back 2 inches. Zarnak's turn to move for the Cannibals, and they're getting themselves in position there within the building just to get a little bit of cover, but they're also going to eye up and see if they can have a little pop at Edgar. Now, Edgar's within range for one of the powers, but they've rolled a 9. That 9 isn't good enough. Again, it's got to be lower than their will stat, and a will stat of 8 for Zarnak, and another 9 means that both powers won't be able to go off this turn. Now, with all of the warriors activated, that brings us to the end of turn 1. And so there's a lot of action going on in the centre of the battlefield here for those objectives. Some melee action, some ranged attacks, and a little bit of damage. We've seen some sneaky goings on from those ranged weapons from Sen and from Viggy as well up on the roof there. And also a nice vantage point for Ragnar to control his warband from. But we've got to look out for Cypher sneaking around the back there. Doesn't seem to be challenged at all. The highlight of turn 1 had to be that building toppling over. Very lucky for Zarnak to escape it as it toppled onto its side. But all up, an interesting turn 1, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen in turn 2 as we approach with just 1 victory point each. So there's still all to play for. Okay, let's not muck around. Let's go straight into turn 2. And as both opponents have all 5 warriors, we have to roll off to see who's going to activate first. And it's the assassins with a 6 win the roll off. So the assassins go first. Edgar's chosen, does a search, rolls an 8, and he's straight in there with 1 more victory point for the assassins, giving them a little early lead. But I don't think they're going to keep that for very long. Leader Ragnar gave Edgar the command token, so now he can make a charge, and with a roll of 9 he's well within range and goes straight in at Daedric. He's determined to take this guy out of the battle. Edgar strikes first, and he needs to get equal to or less than his fight skill. So his fight skill's 6, so he doesn't actually hit here, and neither does Daedric. But I made another mistake here. I took that 7 as a hit and removed 1 point from Daedric. So I shouldn't have done that, but I guess that's payback for Edgar's mistake earlier on. And I suppose this should even things up going forward. Grosnog for the Cannibals chooses not to move and instead rolls for a search of that objective. That 8 makes for a successful search and a victory point. For his next action, he decides to charge, rolls another good 8, and that's going to get him right up to Ingrid the Beast there. And he's being quite tactical here because Ingrid has to turn to face him, which exposes her rear to Zarnak, so she could get some extra damage there. Right, melee combat, let's roll those dice together then. So 1 attack for Ingrid, 2 for Grosnog, and this is better, all 3 hit. Both warriors now have to make a saving roll. Ingrid needs 3 or less. Grosnog brushes that off easily, but for Ingrid, that's 2 points of damage now. Ingrid's pushed back 2 inches, and then we'll just place a dice there to show she's only got 1 point of damage remaining. Ingrid activates for the assassins now and chooses to search the objective, rolls a 5, and that's 1 quick and easy victory point, making it 3 points to 2. A little mistake there, did you see it? But now she makes the combat phase and decides to charge, and with a 2-inch charge she just makes it. But she can add to it anyway, because Ingrid has got that lightning fast ability, which gives her +2 anyway. Let's roll both the attacks together for the melee combat phase, and Ingrid has to get less than 7, Daedric has to get less than 6. So Daedric fails both, but 1 hit gets through there for Ingrid. Let's see if it does any damage, and Daedric needs to get less than a 2. With an 8, that's not good enough. He's going to take 1 point of damage, and that's enough to take him out of the game. He's only got 1 left, so Daedric is our first casualty and is removed from the battlefield. That's another victory point for the assassins as they start to sneak away in the lead now. But Zarnak is not having any of it for the Cannibals, and they move in close enough to that objective, so that's 1 move action. Zarnak chooses to search the objective, and that's an 8, so a successful search, and 1 victory point goes to the Cannibals, making that lead not quite so big now. Zarnak wants to keep going, so takes that command token, and she can use her powers now. Because of her adaptive upgrade, she can change whichever power she wants each activation. So first of all, she rolls for Protect, and that goes off with a 6. Zarnak gives it to Grosnog, who gets +2 now for his next save roll when he's attacked. Second power is Missile, and with a 3, that's certainly within that 8 will, and then she rolls again to see what it's going to be, and rolls an 8. Now that's going to give 1 point of damage, and she chose to give that to Ingrid the Beast. So Ingrid the Beast now takes 1 more point of damage, and that's going to take Ingrid out of the battle, and she's removed from the battlefield. That kill gets 1 more victory point, and that's a tie now. It's 4 victory points each. It's back to the assassins now, and it's the turn of Viggy, who measures up just to see whether or not Zarnak is in range, and he wants to get some revenge there, and yet well within that 20-inch range, so he can take 2 shots, and with that free aim, that's going to give him +2 to the roll. So he's going to get 2 dice to roll, and then that's going to be a 3 and a 4, taking it to a 5 and a 6. That means 1 shot gets past the 5 dexterity of Zarnak, who rolls for defense, needed a 3 or less, gets an 8, so that's 1 point of damage for Zarnak. Because of that point of damage, Zarnak has to roll on the wound chart. It's a 5, and that's going to be sliced, giving a -2 penalty to the fighting skill of Zarnak. And that's going to be a huge penalty if she wants to get stuck in any close combat later in the battle. Now it's the turn of Zen, the Pistolier, for the Cannibals. He can just get through that gap, so moves up to get a good, clear look into the battlefield, but sneaks behind those trucks to try and get a little bit more cover. Now he's going to measure up to see if he's in range of Edgar there, and he certainly is. So he's going to roll 2 dice. This is 10-inch range, and he's going to re-roll any missed hits. So a 3 and a 4, they both miss. Let's re-roll those. That's a 1 and a 10. That 10 is a critical hit, counts as 2 hits instead of 1. So that's 2 dice that Edgar has to roll now in defence, and they get a 5 and a 9. That's not good enough though. Edgar needed a 3 or less, and so with 2 wounds there, that's Edgar out of the battle and removed from the battlefield. One more victory point for the Cannibals, putting them in the lead. Inga the Witch takes advantage of her Fly Agile ability upgrade and is going to move behind Ragnar to give him some support, and so she doesn't have to take into account the vertical distance here, so she gets into a nice position and then uses the combat phase to set off her powers, and she gets both of those. They both go off. That gives Ragnar a time slip token now, and he can use this to turn any single fail to hit, save, charge or stat check into a success, and because of the protect spell also going off, that's 2 points higher for his save value now. Cypher activates for the Cannibals next, and he's been pretty quiet this battle. He sneaked his way up to the objective, used his movement to get within range, rolls a dice, that's a 3 in a successful search. That's going to give 1 more victory points to the Cannibals, taking them to a 6-4 lead now. Ragnar measures up just to see if he's within half his range, and he is. He's well under that 10 inch, so he's going to get +1 to hit now. He also chooses to aim, so that's another +2, so this is +3 to his hit rolls, and let's see what he gets as he rolls a 3 and a 6. That's going to be a 6 and a 9 now, and even with that they both beat the dexterity score of 5 now that Zarnuk has, and Zarnuk rolls to saving one of those. That 2 is what she needed, but she's going to take 1 point of damage there, so let's reflect that on the dice, putting her down to just 1 damage point remaining. Don't forget that wound chart roll, and it's a 10, a critical. That's 1 extra point of damage going on to Zarnuk. Was a really important roll that takes that final point of damage away, because you can't make a save against that wound table roll, and Zarnuk's off the battlefield. That's 1 more victory point for the Assassins now, bringing things to 6 points to the Cannibals, 5 to the Assassins. And that brings us to the end of turn 2, and things got a bit out of hand pretty quick there, with lots of fighters being taken out of the battle quite quickly. Ragnar had a great roll with that 10. This guy's been camping a lot though. I'd like to see him get in the action a little bit more. Same for Cypher, just sneaking around in the background. Get in there and take some shots. But I think Grossnog's been leading from the front, getting in there, and then being backed up by Sen, who's having that covered position. But overall, a real tight battle in the middle, and I think as we go into turn 3, it really could be anyone's game. It's really close on victory points, so let's get stuck in. It's time for turn 3. Both warbands have 3 warriors, so it's time to roll off to see who activates first, and this time it's the Cannibals. It looks like Grossnog's retreating from the centre, and he's making his way back towards this objective with Cypher here. So he uses his move action to get in base contact with the objective, and then he's going to roll a dice, and let's see if it's a successful save. It is. He knocks down some of the cargo crates, but that's okay, we can pick those back up. That's a successful search and 1 more victory point. That's 7 points to 5 now. Ragnar activates next for the Assassins, and he's eyeing up Sen there and considers taking a shot, but he's seeing those points getting away with the victory points and decides to move down from that platform into the centre and take one of the objectives for a search. He measured up, he can do that, he's well within distance, and he's not going to take any falling damage this time, so he gets himself in a nice position. He's facing Sen just so he doesn't get attacked in the back, but decides against attacking again, and now chooses to roll to search that objective instead. And with a 2, that's a successful search, and he's going to gain a sneaky victory point there for the Assassins. But he's not done. He takes that command token. He's determined to have a go at Sen, and so measured up, and definitely within half range, so that's +1 now, so that's really great. So +1 to the hit rolls, so that's 2 shots. Let's see what we get. It's a 7 and an 8. That's certainly enough to beat. There's 2 hits go through and 2 saves. 10 and an 8 are way too high, and that's 2 shots going through, 2 points of damage inflicted on Sen. That's a great result, but no, Ragnar's forgotten to do the wound chart roll again. He's certainly kicking himself for that one as the turn goes to the Cannibals, and it's now Cypher measuring up to do a little sneaky move towards another objective, and he's certainly in range to get there with his 8 movement, and so he moves to get in touch with that, but keeping 2 inches away from Ragnar. Rather than attacking, he chooses to roll to search, and it's a successful search on a 5. That's going to be one more victory point going to the Cannibals. It looks like they're starting to pull away now. They've got 8 victory points, and the Assassins have only got 6. Oh, but what's this? Cypher's also taken that command token. He's finally going to get stuck in and decides to charge into Ragnar with a 7. He's easily going to make it, and so he gets within base contact. He's also going to make Ragnar turn around now, so that's going to be interesting to see what Sen can do about that later on. Cypher's only got 1 attack, but Ragnar has 2, so let's see how they get on. And both get 1 hit, so now they both have to make a save. And let's roll for each of them. And first up, it's Cypher. That's a fail. Cypher's going to take 1 point of damage, but that's a successful save for Ragnar. 1 point of damage goes on to Cypher, and Ragnar retreats 2 inches to get that distance between the 2 models. But what's he thinking? The Brutal Realms is getting to him. He's forgot the wound table again. Really missing out on some points here, potentially. But not to worry, here comes the turn of the Assassins again. And now it's Inga the Witch who decides to move down from the perch and get down towards those objectives. It's time to start getting some of those victory points and tying things up a bit. She can't quite get to the objective, but decides to use her powers, and so rolls for the protective one. Gets a 2, that goes off, and then also rolls for the second power that's available to her, which is the time slip. And both successes. So now they're going to be issued to Ragnar. He's going to get that time slip, and he's also going to get +2 to his saves. Sen has a big decision here. Do they take a shot at Ragnar or go for an objective and get another victory point? And it looks like going for the victory point. With only 1 damage point remaining, this could be a smart move. And with a 9, that's a successful search. That's 1 more victory point. And it looks like they're really starting to pull away now. This is a big lead for the Cannibals. Now it's the turn of Viggy, and he's ignoring any camping rules that may apply to the Brutal Realms as he measures up to have a go at Sen. And he's going to take 2 shots. That's a 5 and an 8. Don't forget that aim is free, so it's +2 to both of those, which beats the dexterity. And so that's a really great roll. And they're going to do 2 points of damage, maybe. Let's see what the saves come up with. Certainly don't do anything at all. That's 2 points of damage taken off Sen, and Sen is now removed from the battlefield. Maybe a good idea to get that victory point before they were slain. But that's 1 victory point to the Assassins, and that does pull things a little bit closer now. And that was a really good kill to get at the end of turn 2. And things are starting to hot up in the centre again, but very surprising to see Grossnog retreating. What's this guy doing though? Viggy's just camping there all game. Is he going to come towards an objective perhaps in turn 4? We'll have to wait and see. But I think there's a big lead for the Cannibals here. So a lot of work to do for the Assassins, but still they have a chance. So let's see what happens as we go into turn 4. No need to roll off here. This should have been the Cannibals who went first, but not to worry, we've rolled off, and the result is a 2-1 going to the Assassins. So the Assassins activate first. Ragnar goes first. He decides to aim with his first action, and then uses his attack to take 2 shots, and he's going to add +2 for the aim and +1 at half range. That takes that 5 to an 8, which is a success, but the 2 misses. But not to worry, he does have that time slip from earlier on, so he's going to use the time slip to turn that 2 into a success. So that's 2 hits now, and that leaves Cypher having to make 2 rolls to defend and save. So let's see what they get. It's a 10 and a 3. Cypher needed 2, so that's 2 hits. That's going to take Cypher completely out of the game as they're removed from the battlefield. That time slip made things really interesting here, because now it's 9 points to the Cannibals, 8 to the Assassins. This is really close. Grossnog activates next, and he does something that we didn't see coming at all. He just moves a tiny bit to stay in touch with that objective marker and rolls to search it, and it's a 1. This means the active model is now stuck in rubble and gains a pause token. A sad end to Grossnog's turn there, and I think he might wish he got stuck into combat a little bit more. Now we're back to Inga the Witch. She's going to make a movement up to that objective barrel there, and she's going to do a search, and let's see what she gets. It's a 4. That's a successful search, and that's going to be 1 more victory point to the Assassins, and that ties things up. Now it's 9 points each. There's only 1 model left to activate, And that's Viggy up there, perched up in his camping position, and he's finally going to make a move. Let's see, he's got a movement of 8, so can he get down here without falling? Take a dexterity check, so he has to roll less than a 6, and what is it? It's a 5! He does it! He doesn't take any falling damage there. Remember the faction traits from earlier on? Viggy's decided to use the feat, which gives an extra 6 to the model's move stat. So now he can move 6 more inches there as part of that single move action. That's going to get him right up close now. Now he has to make a run here, and he's got to get 3. Anything less than a 3 is going to be a fail, and it's going to be a draw. He has to get to this barrel, and he does it with a 9. He's right in there, and so now if he only had one more action, which he does because of that command token, now he can do a search of the barrel, and if it's a successful search, they'll get a victory point and win the game. If it's unsuccessful on a 1 or a 10, then it will stay as a draw. Here comes the last roll of the game. It's just out of focus. What is it? It's a 3! He makes a successful search, and that's going to be 1 victory point to the assassins, taking them into the lead with 10 victory points for the assassins and 9 for the cannibals. That was a crazy end to an action-packed game, and this really did get brutal in round 2, with lots of the fighters being taken out. The action stayed in the centre of the battlefield for most of the game there, and Ragnar really controlled things, I think. But Grossnog made a bit of a dumb decision going off to that far objective. He should have stayed in the centre and tried to provide some opposition to Ragnar as he approached it. But it was Viggy who saved the day, this sneaky camper who didn't move the whole game until the very end, the very last activation of the whole game, and he brought it right down to the wire with that final roll to win the game. So that was a real great fun game. Round 1 was really fun with the building collapsing. I think that was an awesome feature to bring in. And with the different region traits that go on with different setups for terrain, you can get all different things like that happening depending on the area you set the battle in. So I think that's a really cool feature. The setup phase, where the barrels were moved randomly, really decided how things were going to go and put a lot of attention into the centre of the battlefield. So I wonder what would have happened if it was spread out a bit more and how these two warbands would have gone up against each other. But I like that randomness, and I like how you can take a chance by how you set your fighters up and how you position them in the deployment zones. I was repeating some silly mistakes here. I was forgetting about that wound chart roll a few times, and I was also, during the movement phase, searching sometimes as well, and you can only do that in the combat phase, so I got a little bit mixed up there. I'll certainly learn from that, but hopefully I've interpreted it pretty close to as it should be, and I had a great time anyway, so that's the main thing. It was a really fun game to play. I really liked building the warbands and getting them ready prior to the battle and thinking about what models I could use, and I picked out some of my favourite ones that I like. And as I expand my collection of models into different games other than Games Workshop that you see here, then I'm certainly could imagine having some really unique models for this game. It'll be really fun to go looking to put together a small warband of 5 models like this from different manufacturers and creators. So I think that's a really fun aspect of the game too. I'd really like to do an animal people warband, and so go look for some miniatures that would fit into that. I think that would be really fun. When I did the book review, I did say I was only going to use the basic classes, but after getting some advice from Scott Wainwright, who wrote the book, he suggested that I just go for it and play with the different upgrades as well. And so I did. I went with all the different upgrades and didn't hold back. So I didn't go with the simple version of the game. And I'm glad I didn't, because it added a lot of extra rules and made it a lot more dynamic. And I think if I did go with those basic ones, it'd be great to get the hang of it, just how to move and how to do the attacks. But I don't think I would have got the full idea of what this game's all about. I'm really looking forward to learning more about the game, playing lots more battles, and then also starting to move on and look at the solo aspect of the game with the AI and things like that. There's lots that this game offers, so if you want to look at playing solo, then this could be a good way to go. And I'll do a separate video on the solo rules later on here on the channel. The game's also got a solid campaign mode to it, so there's lots going on there. There's a huge campaign section in the book, so there's so much to go through. I think this is just an introductory game, is a nice way just to show the different classes, what kind of models you can use, and the mechanics of the game as an overview. But there's a lot more to see and do, so I can highly recommend getting the book and giving it a go, and I'll put links to where you can find that book in the description below. I think I'll play a few more games and then come back later on, maybe after a few weeks, and just do another kind of overview, just with my feelings about it, try out the campaign a little bit, and just share some of my thoughts. Because just playing to this kind of level, like I said, there's a lot more to get stuck into. So I want to give it a real good shot and also focus heavily on the solo play. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it gave you a good idea of what the game's all about. And yeah, I'd love it if you supported Scott as an independent creator, game writer and publisher, and bought a copy of his book by following the link down below. If you haven't seen it already, the Brutality Skirmish Wargame book review is on the channel already, so you can have a good look seeing exactly what's included with an overview of everything that you get. Thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make these daily videos possible, and if you're interested in joining the community, it'd be awesome to see you there, and I'll put a link for that in the description down below.